Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a midweek video. As promised, I've decided to put together some videos that will address some post-processing problems that some of my members or my viewers might have with their images. So I have asked my members to submit photographs. Hopefully I'll be putting these out once a week, every Wednesday. It kind of depends on whether I'm away or not, and you know, sometimes things get in the way, but that's the idea, is to hopefully have one each week. Now then, before I start, Shimoda camera bags, they have a great sale on right now. Now it's only on until the 15th, so that I think it ends tomorrow, but 25% off, which is a great deal. And if you use the code Gibbs 10, you'll get another 10% off. So that's 35% off your purchase, which is an awesome deal. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link down below. Unfortunately, it's only the North American store, so I don't think it's going to work for my European friends, so I apologize for that. Right, let's get right into our first photograph. All right.
Okay, this week's image has been submitted by Jennifer Kraus, and she entitled her question here, "Maybe my light is too quiet." And the question is, I'm submitting a picture I took from aboard a cruise to Glacier Bay in August of this year. How can I make the waterfall pop a little more through the fog and still look natural? And the second part of this question is also, the water was an incredible color that just didn't come through at all. What did I do wrong? I'm adding a raw file of the water that shows the color better, so you can see what I mean. Thanks for any other thoughts and feedback. Right, Jennifer, I have the image opened up in Lightroom, and I'm going to see if I can do most of this in Lightroom, because I know that a good portion of you watching this probably just use Lightroom. So let's see how far we can go with this. So the waterfall in question is this one back here. And my first thought is, I mean, this is an absolutely stunning scene, and I mean, the mood is just incredible. But if it's the waterfall that you really wanted to photograph, then I probably would have slapped on a slightly longer focal length and zoomed in on the waterfall. But having said that, there are a couple of things we can do to try and bring more attention to that waterfall. And as far as the color of the water, we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, there is a couple of technical problems with this. The first thing I notice is that if I blow it up to 100% here, the image is actually not sharp, which is not a huge problem. And we might be able to get around that a little bit using another program. But first of all, let's see what we can do with this waterfall. So, as I've said in many videos in the past, our eye generally goes towards the brightest section in the image. And this photograph as it is now is pretty much even. There are lots of bright areas in there, but there isn't any one subject that really attracts your attention. So we want to be able to, I guess, draw more attention to the waterfall. So what I would probably do is actually make a little bit of a mask here. In this case, we have a brush, the brush tool, and I'm going to zoom in. Let's see here. Let's try 300%. So zooming right into the waterfall here. We have the brush. We have a mask on. Auto mask is off. And what I'm going to do is just paint a mask. Let's just bring this right up. Paint a mask over the waterfall here. And I have it quite feathered because we don't want any kind of transitional lines. We don't want people to see that we've brightened this up. Now I'm only going to be able to do this a little bit before it looks a bit odd. So we have our mask. We've masked out the waterfall. And what I'm going to do here is just bring up the whites. Now you notice as I bring up the whites, it also brings up the surrounding area. So that's why we have to be careful with this. So I'll bring up the whites ever so slightly. but I'm also going to bring the shadows down, and I might actually bring the exposure down just a tad. So ideally, all I'm trying to do is just brighten up these white areas. So if we click that on and off now, you can see that I have indeed brightened up that waterfall, but it's also brightened up the edges of that. So let's click on that mask again and give this a bit more of an adjustment. We can bring the blacks down, that might help a little bit. And the exposure ever so slightly. Bring up the whites again. Let's see what that looks like. That might be too much. Okay, let's see here. Let's bring the whites down. We could also try the highlights. Okay, let's just zoom out here. And we're just going to have a look at that. So you can see we've brightened up the waterfall, but I still think that might be too much. So I'm just going to bring that down ever so slightly. There's only so much we can do with this without it starting to look really quite fake. Highlights, whites. Okay, that's not too bad. Now, something else we can do, we can darken the top here and darken a little bit to bring more attention to this central portion here. And again, it's about trying to do it reasonably subtle without overdoing it. So again, I'm going to get a mask here, linear gradient. We'll try that. Now this time I'm going to bring the size of the image down a little bit here. And I'm going to bring our gradient in ever so slightly to there. And I'm just going to bring the exposure down ever so slightly. Say something like that. And then another linear gradient. This time I'm coming up from the bottom. And actually let's make that a bit more abrupt. And again, bring the exposure down ever so slightly, but also bring up the whites because I don't want to lose the cloud reflections in there. And then lastly, with the masks, let's go with a radial, and we can bring this right across the center here. And I'm just going to bring up the whites. That portion there, and a little bit of the highlights there. So as you can see, it's not going to be drastic, but we are bringing a little bit more attention into this area here by just brightening up certain areas in here. Now then, as far as the color of the water goes, so here is the other file that was sent to me, and this is the color of the water that was remembered. There are a couple of things you can do when you're in the field. Often a polarizer will really help. It will saturate some of those colors and get rid of some of that the glare on the water. You're probably pointing your camera in a slightly different angle here, so you're not getting the cloud reflections, and that's why the water isn't looking as vibrant as you remember it. So you'll see here that even though there's a little bit of color in here, it's quite gray and drab because our eyes deceive us, and the camera doesn't always record exactly what we see in front of us. So we can bring that back somehow by, again, using some masks here, and we can use some of the existing masks. So this mask that we made for the lower section here, we could actually bring up the saturation ever so slightly. That'll alter the color. But we can also add color. you'll notice there's this box here that says color and it has an X going through it. You can actually click on that and you can change the color of whatever the mask is, anything you want. So we're going to cheat a little bit here, and we're actually going to add some color in there. Now, of course, I wasn't there. I can only go by the photograph that you sent me, but I'm going to say it's kind of a turquoisey blue here. And this might be a little bit too much, but what we can do is just bring down the saturation to a point where we think the color is back to where we thought it was, like so. There we go. And I would actually even bring up the whites just a little bit more. See, that still looks too saturated to me, so we'll just go back, bring it down just ever so slightly, like so. And you could change the color of the interior as well, because contrasting colors kind of they complement one another, and we could do this very subtly. So this mask in the center here, what we could do is just add a slightly warm tone. We can either just do that with the temperature gauge here, or the slider up here, just add a little bit of yellow, ever so slight, or you can do the same thing by adding some color, or you can just leave it the way it is, more of a neutral. And as I look at this, I think what we can do is, I'm going to actually bring, I've got the exposure right. I'm actually going to put another mask on this. Let's go with a radial filter, like so. And I'm actually going to add a bit of a vignette on here. I'm just going to bring the exposure down ever so slightly around the edge. Okay, that's done the center. Sorry, I've got to invert this. There we go. Again, that might be a little bit too much. It's all to taste. And as I look at this, I'm looking at the center one again. So I'm actually going to bring that up even more. Something like that. So I don't know as if this has really drawn as much attention as you had hoped for. Obviously, we can still play with this just a little bit by playing around with these masks. You can keep going back to them quite easily. We could bring up the whites ever so slightly more. But as I said, if it stands out too much, then you've probably done it too much. So you have to be careful here. Zoom in 100%. That doesn't look too bad. There we go. So let's have a look at the final image here. Let's just load this up. And there we go. We can see that our eye does go straight to the waterfall. The color of the water has changed ever so slightly. So it is subtle. There's not going to be a huge amount of changes, but I think overall, I think we have achieved what we set out to do. All right, so if I just go back to the original file here, and I've created a virtual copy, so we can have a look at the before and after. So this is what the file looked like at the beginning, and then this is what we've achieved with a little bit of careful processing. And of course, we can enhance this a little bit more. Like if you wanted to brighten up the whites in here, you could just brush in a mask in there and this area here, and just brighten up those areas ever so slightly. You know, the sky is the limit, and I guess that's the problem that a lot of people have, is trying to kind of define, well, what is it that you want to say with your photograph? And I think we were at a good start here by saying, okay, we really wanted to bring more attention to this waterfall. So that's what we've done, and we've enhanced the color of the water just ever so slightly. Now, when it comes to sharpness, what we can do is, so let's take this photograph here. we'll just go back to the original here. We can edit this in a program called Topaz Sharpen AI, and that does a pretty good job of bringing back the sharpness in blurry images. I'm guessing that the image was perhaps handheld because you're on a boat, so you know, you're kind of, sometimes you're limited with, you can't use a tripod on a boat because you're moving around, or your shutter speed isn't fast enough. Various things can happen. But even with the default removing blur and suppressing noise, you can see that Sharpen AI does a pretty darn good job of sharpening this image overall. So let's apply that. Might take a little while to do. Okay, so this is the sharpened results. And if we go to 100%, you can see that Topaz has done a really great job of sharpening up what was otherwise quite a blurry photograph. So there we go. If you have any other questions, be sure to throw them my way. If you have any thing you would like to say about the processing, some easier ways to do this, then I'm always open to suggestions and other ways of processing photographs. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give me the old thumbs up. That's always appreciated. And until next time, thanks ever so much.